Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Season 1, Episode 3 of True Lies. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, I do love the whole Luther and Maria angle that we got this episode. Well, first and foremost, the moment they were kissing, it's like, oh, we're such a good team. I was like, whoa. So you guys are a couple? I was like, definitely didn't pick that up from the first two episodes, but then we find out they're not. I think that also shows their professionalism, that the fact, I guess it comes with the spy territory. Because I've just never had that situation where, I've not, guess everyone makes do with it. But like I said, the professionalism of it, you broke up 4 years ago and you're still working together as a well-oiled machine, pretty much. The thing is, because I was about to say, it's Harry and his wife, that was kind of a whole thing. But it's to be fair, Harry and Helen ended up meeting. Harry was a spy, and him and Helen got together, after he was already a spy for a while. But then I'm like, well, it could also be, Harry did marry a civilian, whereas at the very least, most likely Maria and Luther met on a job, so it's a little bit of a different circumstance. It's mainly it stems from Helen being a civilian, I think, in the equation. I think that's what kind of ends up being kind of the issue in that regard. But nevertheless, obviously, I love, because this episode obviously deals with the compartmentalization. Obviously, Helen, every time I want to say that character's name, I want to say Nikki. She-Hulk has completely screwed me up, because every time I want to say Helen, I have to hesitate because I'm about to say Nikki. Nevertheless, Helen, obviously was kind of getting adjusted to everything last episode. She's reading the training manuals over and over and over again, because it's that's kind of part of the gig. But the fact of the matter is a lot of this episode's about compartmentalizing. So Harry, for so many years, got to compartmentalize for 17 years, so he has a lot more practice on it than Helen does. Helen had to stay home, and it's while you're off saving the world, doing your thing, I was here, looking after the kids, handling everything on the home front while also balancing working and teaching and grading stuff. So the more normal, everyday life, which can be overwhelming, especially when you have a sink that's backed up because your dishwasher is messed up and they're basically slapping together with glue and tape trying to keep it together because they don't have enough money to fix it. But it's we're spies, but it's but we have to make sure the money we make is representative of the job we're quote unquote working as, our covers. So we can't be, because then people start asking questions this, why are you splurging like that? Can you really make that as a computer salesman and a teacher? Even if you are working at a university, we all know, I'm sure, the general consensus is that teachers don't get paid well. I'm assuming the same thing is for professors too, probably, unless it's a tenure situation, which I think Nikki had. I did it. Oh, I hate when I do the name. I literally, when Helen, oh God, I hate myself for that. When Helen, I think she has tenure with her cover, but it still probably isn't enough. But either way, Harry's trying to get her to compartmentalize, and he's even doing the same thing with Luther, because Luther's right, especially this episode, they're going after the engineer. The last time they went after the engineer was 4 years ago, which led to an MI6 agent, Ian, dying, and they were a pretty good team, Luther and Maria, but then, after Ian died, she broke things off with him. We find out later on, but we'll get to that later. But Harry's telling, Luther to kind of compartmentalize. It's take those feelings, you're supposed to bury them and put them in a box. He's they were in a donut-sized box until it came open. He's put the donut back, because I've seen you knock back about 6 of them moment this mission came up, because it's bringing back all those emotions, and it's just kind of got him thinking about Maria again. So it's right, bury those feelings and keep them in a box. And that's a little easier for Harry, considering he's in a good relationship, but he also doesn't have to lie to his wife, so they're kind of even in a better place in that regard. But also, it's he spent so long compartmentalizing, it's a little easier for him than it probably is other people. I guess that's also what makes Harry the good spy that he is. But either way, even though Harry had his reluctancy of, it's okay, so this episode, Helen had to go undercover when it came to the whole engineer situation because they were going undercover to go after a guy named Peter, who's part of some fascist group in South Africa called the Noble Cross. And he's there, like, gambling, and he's supposed to meet up with the engineer because the engineer's got, like, this portable nuclear weapon. And at first, like, Harry was making a whole point of, like, oh, Helen should be going I was like, she went undercover last episode, but it's like, to be fair, she went undercover. It wasn't really going undercover because she was basically using her alias, her cover, which is not too far from who she was able to just be herself, essentially. So it wasn't really going undercover, like creating a persona and, background, like playing this character. But now they get to. Obviously, Luther and Maria are going to be, the card dealers during some of the games. But the whole point is to make Peter lose all his money so that he's forced to rely on them and they can use that as leverage to, track down the engineer and ultimately stop the sale of this portable nuclear weapon. Peter is played by, I might be butchering his name, but I think it's spelled differently, but I think it's pronounced just Owen Yalman, and I could be utterly butchering that. But there was something like, not recently, but I want to say maybe it was a Blacklist at one point in time. But the thing I know him best for is the show, CBS-wise connection, is The Mentalist. What is it, Rigsby or Rigby? I don't remember. It might be Rigby. Oh, God, it's been a while. That's a show I also need to finish. I saw like a couple, like maybe 3 episodes of the final season. I've never actually seen how The Mentalist actually ends. Even after all these years. I might just go back and rewatch the entire show. Tangents and all that aside. But also, like, the reason why I'm struggling with the name because, like, my niece falls asleep watching regular show, so I have it in the general zeitgeist of my mind a lot more because of that. So I'm constantly seeing it's Rigby. So is it Rigsby from The Mentalist and Rigby from regular show? So that's what's mixing me up. It's damn you, regular show. Regardless, tangents and all that aside, but yeah. I love that initially he's supposed to be like was some kind of billionaire and she's supposed to be the supermodel. But the moment they met Peter and his girlfriend, what was it, Tiffany, it's like, she's like, if I have to meet another trophy wife. So at the last second they switched roles. She's the billionaire and he's the eye candy, model and stuff like that. She's like, oh yeah, this is my little kitten. So obviously Nikki had her reservations being like, I'm not sure if I could do this, especially when it's like, cool, I'm rocking these shoes that if I sell one of these, it'd be enough to fix our dishwasher and stuff. But it's like, and it kind of means nothing to Harry. He's like, yeah. She's like, yeah, you're literally wearing like a $10,000 outfit. He's like, yeah, but it's part of the role. So he's kind of thinking of it like, oh, it's just kind of accessories, doesn't mean anything. It's like, because Nikki's like, can we sell these on the side? It's like, would you get in trouble for doing that? I mean, I guess the CIA would, I guess Omega Sector in particular, like any government agency when it comes to cover stuff like that, because you have to account for all that stuff. So like money and stuff like that, you have to account for when it comes. That's why Gibbs later on, it's like, you're going to have a conversation with an accountant later on when you're like, all right, instead of just the $3 million, we're going to need $6 million instead. So it's like they have to keep track. The government's probably even bigger of a stickler with that, or at least supposed to be more of a stickler when it comes to government agency. Real world wise, money can disappear, and it's like, oh, we have no idea where that money went. So that's a whole other conversation. But in the context of this, every bit of money has to be accounted for. So probably the clothes have to be accounted for too, because the agency does go out of its way to buy those clothes. So they probably have to reimburse them, or at the very least be able to write it off and say it's part of the expense report to the government. They have to be like, yeah, we spent this amount of money, yada, 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 so on and so forth. It's interesting little details I really don't think about too much, and it doesn't really come up too much when it comes to the spy stuff. So I think that's kind of neat. But either way, they were able to kind of hit it off with Peter and Tiffany, and the next time they ran into each other, made Peter lose a lot of money. And it's like, oh, it's poor bastard. The cards were, literally, not even figuratively, literally stacked against you, and he ended up losing $3 million. I kind of figured the engineer had to be the guy that ended up being, just because it's like, oh, because even Nikki's like, yeah, why is that guy, he's so, like, it's just, they made a point to kind of showcase that guy, but also every time Peter went over there to, get some more money out, that guy was beside it, and Nikki even took notice of, like, why is that guy there? That's weird. So I'm like, I figured it had to be. And I love that it plays into it, where it's like, Harry was so focused on Peter, but Nikki's like, yeah, I was focused on everyone else. She's like, that's what the manual says. Because I think Harry's been doing this thing so long, he's kind of, he's created his own style. He kind of approaches things from like his seniority situation as like a senior like spy. So he probably like freestyles. He kind of just, goes about things his way. Nikki is super fresh on the rules, and it's like, right, there's a lot of probably like more by the book and technicalities behind like, the training manuals and stuff. And so because of that, like, she's picking up, probably base level like spy stuff, and it was like, right, keep an eye on the surrounding room, and that ended up being her way to figure out who the engineer actually was. That was the guy that's like, oh, I thought he was just being nosy, but it's like, no, he was there every time Peter took money out of the account or whatever. So you kind of feel bad for Peter. It's just kind of like, well, oh, because, I mean, he kind of, because he was losing so much money, he had to get it back. He ended up, like, kind of pissing off his girlfriend, and I guess she just left, because I was like, oh, because and he was kind of stressed, because it's like, cool, I lost all that money, now Tiffany's going too. I guess she just straight up left. And it's like, oh, I wondered, and the sad, I mean, we won't get into it, because that'd be too kind of heartbreaking and depressing to get into in a kind of more action-y comedy show, but it's like, yeah, like, her boyfriend died. It's like, they might have been, like, especially considering their last time together wasn't the greatest thing. He was grabbing on her, being like, leave me alone. And she's like, fine, do whatever you want to. Because she was the one trying to be his conscience, being like, yo, not conscious, but being like, yo, you might want to slow down. You've already lost enough money. I even love Harry being like, $3 million. Oh, wow, I didn't even notice. I mean, he's like, yeah, my wife spends that much on purses and stuff like that. So, and, showing, and I do love that they do lean into, like, yes, because Harry is the spy that he is so cool, calm, and collected. So the fact of the matter is, later on when Peter pulled a gun on, he's like, yo, I got this. I'm going to talk you down. I'm going to get you the money that you need. And then later on, when he has to jump out of the car, and he's like, oh my God, honey, you're doing I'm so proud of you, honey. And he's saying it so calm, and she's freaking out the entire time. I even love that it's like, no, honey, you can't like shoot and drive. It's in the manual. So she's like, I'll drive and shoot. I mean, I think we've watched, I'm sure everyone's watched plenty of stuff where people do the driving and shooting, but it does make more sense so you can focus more so on one thing at a time. You give something your entire focus rather than kind of having to split your mind between both. So luckily, when it's all said and done, they were able to stop the engineer. It was, both sides of the teams, because I did like, obviously, it's like, well, what do we do about this vehicle? If we shoot it, maybe there's a potentiality that, like, the weapon could get struck and, get set off. And there was like a mail truck or something that was coming their way, and Luther suggested that they, like, let the truck hit them instead, because that way they don't call, because this is enough to like cause like 5 city blocks or something like that worth of damage. I mean, the last time like a weapon of his was used to hurt people, it killed like 180 people and caused like a lot of massive damage. So their luckily they turned out okay, little bumps and bruises and cuts, but overall they're okay. So, and it was good on Luther's part to kind of suggest that, but ultimately ended up taking him down, confiscating the weapon. So, and kind of like I said, going back to that compartmentalizing angle to the episode, obviously throughout this was the Maria and Luther thing. I love the whole thing on comms of like, yeah, because he was like, that we were dating at one point in time. Harry's like, yeah, I know, everyone knows. You were on comms, remember? It's like, yeah. And so even later on, he was asking Maria, like, we were a good team, right? She's like, I'm not about to have this conversation. It's like, comms are on. And it's like, yeah, Gibbs, tell us that you overheard that awkward exchange. And he's like, yep, awkward exchange heard. And it's like, thank you. And he keeps asking her, it's like, come on, admit that we were a good team. She's like, I'm not no, like, whatever, the past is the past. I even love that they had to, because a guy came up to the roof for a cigarette break, they had to hold on for like 2 minutes or whatever. But it's not until he gets hurt later on that Maria finally confesses, like, what happened? Because I was like, right. Because for him, it's like, right, we got to the airport and we broke up. I was like, what was that about? It's because Ian's death is the catalyst for that. Because initially Luther was supposed to go in there with Ian, but the problem is that, Ian wanted to go alone, so it luckily worked out, but Ian died, and because of that, Luther could have easily been right beside him, and that scared Maria. Like, I was in a situation where I could have lost someone I cared about, and I can't lose someone that I care about like that, especially like that. Losing Ian made that more, I think that's the first time they've really lost anyone they've worked with, or at the very least someone that they were on pretty good working terms with, plus knowing Luther was going to be there. So it's that thing of, I'd rather push you away because it makes it a little easier that I'm not blinded, or at least like holding on so deep. Because the moment he's like, right, I get it, you don't care about it. It's like, right, I'm gonna put it in the past. There's a look on her face that seemed like she was worried and concerned. Like, no, don't think like I don't care about you at all. It's like, I do, but sadly he was so hopped up on meds that he ended up passing out afterwards, so he didn't hear that part of the conversation. And she's probably smarter about the comms thing. Well, I mean, she messed up on the but maybe because they're not together, she remembers to turn the comms off when she has those intimate things. So Gibbs probably never heard that part of it either. So, but that's a thing we know, and Maria's confessed, but maybe Luther, maybe in his days and his being knocked out, maybe he heard it, most likely he didn't. So I'm curious. That does set up some interesting things of because this whole thing probably made her had to confront her feelings about it as well. And it's like, right, it's not like she doesn't care about him. She does. So question is she still going to keep him at a distance, or does this change things? Because, maybe once again, he doesn't realize it, but maybe she does. And we'll see ultimately what this means kind of going forward. So, continue that compartmentalizing conversation again. We had Harry, saying that once again he was able to compartmentalize so much because he always knew, like, hey, Helen's home, she's with the kids, she's taking care of everything, she's got everything handled on her own. But he's like, from now on, now that we are both working, like, I'm going to have to start because it's like it shouldn't just be you struggling with the whole like compartmentalizing both. I need to do my part and start, like, I have to compartmentalize about home as well too, because you're not there. Like, I could give my entire focus to the job because you were at home, so I didn't have to worry, but now we're both here, so we both have to compartmentalize. That way it's not just on Helen doing all of it, it's also on Harry too. It's like, you want to enjoy being rich for another hour. I was like, and they looked at the money, I was like, are you going to bang it out on the money? Maybe they did eventually, or maybe they didn't, but they sure as hell got in the bathtub, and it's like, going a little Scrooge McDuck, obviously money-wise and stuff like that. I mean, that's the thing of like, being super rich and banging it out on money, like, that's supposed to be the thing. I love that things have joked about it and been like, it's kind of not all that it's cracked up to be. I've never done it before, so you won't know until you try, I guess, type of situation. But yeah, I thought that was kind of nice and sweet, and just being able to kind of enjoy being rich for a while. So just another fun episode. I'm really interested to ultimately see where the next mission takes us, where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. We also never got any conclusion for I guess they still had the drive. Who knows if they actually looked into it? So I don't know. I'm interested. The fact is, they left that open-ended after last episode. I'm curious, because we didn't get anything this episode, makes me think they did and they're just not sure what to say, or they haven't watched it at all, and maybe there'll be a kind of B plot that ends up coming up later on in the season. I don't know. I'd be curious to see if they circle back to that or not. But either way, like I said, excited to see where the next episode takes us. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.